Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a categorical deep dive into the most crucial editorials you need to know about right now. We've gone ahead and sifted through all the noise to extract the exact high-yield analysis that is absolutely critical for your UPSC exams. So grab your notepads because today's Explainer is seriously packed with vital data points and strategic insights. We are structuring today's explainer around 5 core syllabus buckets. We'll be hitting geopolitics and bilateral ties, the shifting economic order, domestic governance and schemes, tech policy and privacy, and finally, the climate impact on agriculture. Let's just dive right in. All right, starting off with Section 1, Geopolitics and Bilateral Ties, focusing on navigating neighborhood threats and strategic alliances. So let's look at India's firm diplomatic posture right in its immediate neighborhood. We have to start with this incredibly uncompromising quote from the Ministry of External Affairs regarding the Indus Water Treaty. They've explicitly stated the treaty remains in abeyance until Pakistan, and I quote, credibly and irrevocably ceases its support for cross-border terrorism. I mean, that is a strict zero-tolerance approach from New Delhi, basically drawing a line in the sand and rejecting Islamabad's habitual attempts to internationalize these bilateral disputes. But you kind of have to wonder, right? Why is Pakistan making this sudden push to frame the Indus River system as their ultimate economic lifeline on the global stage? Well, according to our sources, these motives are purely strategic deflections. It's essentially a smokescreen. They're trying to mask their own downward spiraling economy and internal insurgent vulnerabilities. By crying foul over water, they're trying to deflect the blame for their domestic failures right onto India's doorstep, all while trying to drag that larger Kashmir dispute back into the international spotlight. Now, shifting gears to a much more constructive bilateral relationship, take a look at this table breaking down the recent Japan-India summit. The emphasis across these 16 key agreements has really shifted. It's no longer just about basic development assistance. We're talking about heavy-hitting economic and maritime security. Both nations are aggressively pivoting toward resilient supply chains and advanced tech. Why? To reduce that massive dependence on China, especially for things like rare earths. From an updated free and open Indo-Pacific posture to building out naval platforms, Japan is basically bringing the capital and the tech, and India is bringing the scale and a massive market. And look, these maritime agreements, they are not just paper promises, they are immediate economic shields for us. Securing the maritime energy transport value chain is literally vital right now, especially when you look at the ongoing attacks on cargo ships off the coast of Yemen and the Red Sea. Thankfully, though, there is a bit of a silver lining for India today. Recent regional ceasefires and a normalization of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz have actually allowed the Indian government to withdraw those emergency natural gas supply curbs we saw put in place back in March. Okay, moving right along to Section 2, the shifting economic order and the return of state intervention. This one is hugely relevant for your GS Paper 3 analysis. So here's a wild thought for you. We really have to ask, why are governments in the US, the UK, and France suddenly stepping in to take over, or at least heavily regulate, private industries? I mean, for decades, the settled ideology in these Western nations was a strict separation of state and industry. Let the free market do its thing, right? But suddenly, we are seeing a massive reversal. Well, the drivers for this shift are pretty multifaceted. A lot of it comes down to geopolitical uncertainty, forcing governments to secure critical supply chains, like the US government deciding to extract a golden share in US steel. But it's also about basic domestic survival. We're seeing governments step in to save literally 100,000 jobs in the South African steel industry or halting the closure of British steel. Plus, and this is key, they are responding to the spectacular failure of privatized services. Take the UK, for example. They are inching toward nationalizing Thames Water and their railways because private operators aggressively slashed costs, shed jobs, and ultimately just failed the public. It is a profound, fundamental shift from free market theory to state-led economic survival. Let's bring it back home for Section 3, Domestic Governance and Schemes, specifically looking at a paradigm shift in rural welfare. If you are prepping for mains, you absolutely need to internalize this comparison. We are seeing a clear transition from MGNRGA to the brand new Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajiva Commission, or VB-GRAM-G, which just came into effect. Now, MGNRGA was fundamentally bottom-up and demand-driven. The new VB-GRAM-G, on the other hand, it totally shifts to a top-down, infrastructure-heavy approach with centrally designed mandates. It introduces a fixed floor wage of 300 rupees per day, which is actually pushing wages up across 21 states and union territories. To power this massive transition, the center has already released over 25,863 crores. But as you might expect, this policy shift is definitely not without its friction. While the center is really highlighting the smooth rollout and that guaranteed 300 rupee floor wage, critics and several states themselves are pointing out a pretty controversial new funding mandate. States are now expected to foot 40% of the bill for a program where the priorities are entirely centrally designed. So that's a massive shift in fiscal federalism that you'll want to track very closely. Moving to Section 4, Tech Policy and Privacy, Balancing Security and Digital Rights. The center's recent intervention into WhatsApp's privacy features has totally reignited this incredibly high-stakes standoff over chat encryption. But look, the core issue here isn't just about one single messaging app. It's really about the entire foundational architecture of digital privacy in India. I love how our sources define this. They call it the tussle of traceability. It's that classic inherent policy conflict. On one side, you have a government's mandate to trace the origin of messages for entirely legitimate public security reasons. On the other side, you have a platform's commitment to end-to-end encryption and user privacy. It's a highly complex constitutional debate where very real-world security concerns are clashing directly with modern protections of personal liberty. There are literally no easy answers here, and it is going to remain a massive gray area in our tech policy. And this debate doesn't just stop at texting apps. It goes right up to cutting-edge artificial intelligence. As global AI policies start taking shape, experts looking at cases like the US government's actions toward the AI firm Anthropic are throwing up major red flags. They're warning that keeping these AI regulations hidden or opaque from the public actually suffocates economic innovation. It just creates this huge cloud of uncertainty for everyday users in the market. So absolute transparency, it turns out, is just as critical as the regulation itself if we actually want these technologies to safely scale up. Finally, our last section for today, Section 5, Climate Impact on Agriculture, focusing on the highly tangible costs of warming. When we talk about global warming, it's easy to get lost in the abstract data, right? Or we immediately think about crop failures. But climate change is having a devastating and incredibly tangible impact on India's livestock and dairy sectors right this very minute. The stress on our animal population is just as critical as the stress on our crops. Just consider this really stark reality. Bovine milk production has absolutely nosedived in the Transgangetic Plains. And the crazy part? This isn't because of feed shortages, and it's not some new disease. It is driven entirely by the severe heat and climate stress placed specifically on buffalo populations. It's a glaring, real-world example of how macro global warming translates directly into a micro loss of livelihood and food security right at the grassroots level. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a final multidisciplinary question to chew on for your mains preparation. Look at all the themes we've covered today. How does India successfully balance its massive domestic economic growth and state-led infrastructure pushes while simultaneously fighting off extreme climate shifts that threaten our agriculture, all while somehow securing its digital borders and protecting citizens' privacy? You have to synthesize these points. Connect the geopolitics to the domestic economy. Connect the tech policy to human rights. That level of interconnected big-picture thinking is exactly what the UPSC is looking for. Keep studying smart, rely on the data, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.